Yeah, a while back my mother-in-law challenged me to a Pannetone cook-off. Now I sort of heard before and tried a couple of those funky Italian fruit cakey sort of delicacies. I'd certainly never tried to make one. Now she's been making them for a couple of years and she's got this recipe she's super proud of. It's this like 8-day long sourdough starter thing that she has going on. It's a lot of work. She's retired, she's got time for it. I thought, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I want something that's going to be a little bit quicker turnaround time and will fit with my busy schedule, particularly around the holidays. That being said, I hit the internet and found actually Serious Eats had this cultured buttermilk process that they use, which turned the entire thing into maybe a 2-day affair instead of well over a week. And I thought that sounded amazing. So I used that as inspiration. They also used some bourbon that they soaked their fruit with in that particular recipe. And that made me think, you know what, one of my favorite cocktails is a cranberry old fashioned. Absolutely delightful. So I'm going to take the Pannetone and do a cranberry old fashioned Pannetone. So I don't know, come along for the ride. Let's see how it goes. So the first step in making this Pannetone is to make some cultured buttermilk. So I'm going to do that using this locally sourced whole milk, so it's 3.25% milk fat, and the starter culture that I picked up from culturesforhealth.com is the manufacturer here. So the first step in this process is the easiest process. You want to have a sterilized or a sanitized jar. I haven't sterilized this, but I did sanitize it using my spray bottle here. This is Star San sanitizer that I use in homebrewing and making kombucha and all kinds of stuff. So I just sprayed that around in there, gave it a really good shake around here to get it everywhere, and then I dumped it out. All right, we've got that lid off. Now, because this is beautiful, organic, local milk here, you can see it's got this fat cap up on the top here. And that's just because it kind of separates a little bit. I'm just going to sort of loosen that off here with, ooh, there we go, with a knife and get all that milk into here. We'll get almost all of it into this jar. I'm just going to save the rest for me. And now we will take our starter culture. We'll open up this package here. So now just following the manufacturer's directions, coming in this really nice little pamphlet here, I'm just going to take one of the 2 packets that came in here. I'm going to tear it open. I had kind of shaken this just a little bit to try to make sure that everything was down on the bottom. I'm going to try to get it open. We'll just ensure that we get, there we go, everything into there. I also sanitized this little spoon. I'm just going to mix it up. It's possible you could get away without mixing it up, but I'm not going to take any risks here. Nicely mixed. Lid on. And now with this lid, I'm not securing it all the way down like that. I'm backing it off a little bit so that this lid here can kind of pop up and down as it needs, just in order to let any sort of gas escape as this is doing its thing. So now we're going to take this milk and we're going to get it into a nice warm spot. You want it between 70 and 77 Fahrenheit and let it sit for 24 hours. I'm actually going to take it up at the top end of that, throwing it into my yeast incubator. Little cheat. If I didn't have that, I would probably throw it on top of my refrigerator there. That'll be the warmest spot in the kitchen. So it's been just over 24 hours since I inoculated this here, and I messed up. I did it off camera, but I kind of busted up. There was a little cap here up on the top. There's still big chunks of it, but this will be ready to go. So now that this is at this stage, I'm going to get this into the refrigerator and we'll let it sit overnight, and then we'll be using it in the morning. All right, night before the bake here, I am making my soaker. So this is where I'm going to be getting all of the fruit and fun old-fashioned flavors going on here. So I'm starting off with cranberries. And this here, again, bearing in mind, this is for the double batch. This is 400 grams of dried cranberries. I've got 100 grams of dried, this is mixed fruit peel. It's gonna give it a lot of citrus. And then again, citrus punch here. I've got 2 zested lemons and 1 zested grapefruit. So again, per recipe, that's 1 lemon and half a grapefruit. You're going to get that into here. And then 200 mils of bourbon. Going with Maker's Mark on this one, which is really nice and old-fashioned. It's going to be really nice in this Pannetone, fingers crossed. So I'm going to mix this all up. I'm going to cover it up, and I'm going to let it sit overnight here so that all of this fruit can just absorb as much of this bourbon as possible, get nice and hydrated up, and then it won't be sucking any moisture out of the actual dough once this gets mixed into that. So even though this is nicely mixed up, I am going to come by once or twice here still tonight, kind of stir it up a little bit before going to bed. In the morning, before I actually get this into the dough, I'll do the same thing, just mixing it up as much as possible. So there we go. Smells delicious. And one final ingredient here would be some citrus bitters. This is some of my sous vide citrus bitters that I made. Super delightful. You can check out that recipe if you want to make some of your own. And I'm adding 2 teaspoons of that, so that would be 1 teaspoon per recipe. Just mixing this up, so there should be lots of citrus in addition to this cranberry flavor here in the Pannetone. And an extremely important step, probably 12 to 16 hours before you actually want to start making your dough, is to make your Biga, which is, if you're a sourdough baker or something like that, it's sort of the equivalent of your leaven. This is just stepping up the culture that is in this buttermilk, which, as you can see, is really nice, and it's chunky, it's clumpy, all kinds of awesome bacteria going in there. So what you need here is 200 grams of flour. I'm using strong baker's flour. I've actually doubled that just because I'm doubling the recipe. So I'm going with 400. Then you need 125 grams, or in this case, 250 grams of buttermilk, which is going to go in a second. But before I do that, I'm just going to mix in some instant dried yeast, and it would be 1 pinch per recipe. So I'm going with a couple of pinches, and I've got tiny fingers, so I'm going to give it just a little extra one there. Mix that up and add the buttermilk. And then I'm just going to mix it by hand here, and I'm going to mix it up until it is completely incorporated, all that buttermilk, and there aren't any big clumps of flour. So we want it to be nice and hydrated. There we are. Now, as somebody who usually makes sourdough with like 75%, sometimes even 80% hydration, this was a little bit more stressful. It's an extremely stiff starter, but I've got it here. It's in a nice ball. I'm going to leave it here in this bowl. You want to cover it up. I guess the nice thing is that there's no real mess on my hands with it come undone. Cover it up with plastic and get it in a warm place. I'm, again, actually going to use my yeast incubator for this and rock that at 80 Fahrenheit just so it has a nice easy time rising. But somewhere warm in your kitchen or on top of the fridge, something like that would work well. We're looking for this to double in size. So we want to get some nice nuttiness in our panettone. We're going to do that with hazelnuts. Now we need to crush these and roast them just so that they're not huge like this and they have some nice added flavor. It doesn't really matter when you do this process as long as you do it far enough in advance that they're cool when you add them. So I'm just going to take them, throw them in a Ziploc bag, and using my rolling pin, give them a little initial crush. And then I can just roll them out. So with the Ziploc bag, I mostly closed it, but I did leave it open just a little bit so that air can escape. There we are, ready to roast. I've got my frying pan here on medium heat. I'm just going to add the nuts there. I'm just going to stir them around here for a couple of minutes and get them nice and browned up. Ooh, these toasted hazelnuts smell amazing. Now I just need to let them cool down. All right, so it is the day where we are actually going to make the panettones. So it's time to make the dough, and for that, again, all the measurements here are for my double batch. I'm going with 400 grams of flour. That's that same strong baker's flour. I'm going to put in the Biga, which, as you can see, has in fact doubled in size. It's really nice and large here, koofy. Get all of that into my dough. We're going to go with our buttermilk. I'm going with 100 grams of the buttermilk. Put that right in. We have our eggs. We have 250 grams of egg yolks. So this was right around a dozen eggs that it took me to get this. And we've got our yeast. So it's 20 grams of just instant yeast. And let's get that set up to mix. Using my stand mixer here with the dough hook, I'm just going to put it on low speed and mix this until it's fully incorporated. So after about 4 minutes, as you can see here, the dough is smooth and fully incorporated. So now it is time to turn this back on. I'm going to leave it on this low speed, and I'm going to add our salt. So I'm actually using fine pink salt here. You could use table salt or any sort of salt. I really like non-iodized salt, so that's why I'm going with that. 24 grams of the salt, and then 150 grams of just white sugar. And this is going to take some more time here, probably another 4 or 5 minutes, just for that to get fully incorporated. While that sugar and salt is mixing in, I've got my 300 grams of flour that we're going to need, just unsalted flour. Now it needs to go in softened but cold at the same time, so you can't just let it warm up on the counter. In this case, the advice given was to use a rolling pin and just smash it around a little bit. I also, of course, had this cut into slices so that it wasn't too thick. Just gonna beat it up here for a sec. Now that my butter's beaten into submission, we're just waiting on that dough to finish mixing, and then we can start to add this. Now that the salt and sugar is fully in there, I'm going to start to add the butter, and I'm just doing that one little chunk at a time. So I'm just cutting it off of this cutting board that I wrapped in plastic wrap here and adding it. And if it starts to kind of ride up the sides, I'm just going to use a little spatula and kick it back down. This is going to take several minutes for me to get all of this butter in here. I'm just going to leave it on this slow mixing speed. Now it's time to add my mixed fruit, which, as you can see, I've strained through a sieve, got any of that excess bourbon, and now it's kind of syrup out of it, and I've got my cold toasted hazelnuts. So let's just mix these in. I'm just going to add all of them, and we're going to let this continue to sit on low mixing speed here until everything is really nicely mixed in. And there we are, fully incorporated. Total mixing time on this was right around 40 minutes. Now it's time to divide this and get it into the molds. So since I'm using these 6-inch Pannetone molds, each of the batches that I'm doing will make 2. So this double batch will make 4 of them. So I need to divide that evenly. So in order to do that, I'm just going to get my dough out of here, and I'm going to get an initial weight on it. All right, so we've got 2664. So I'm just going to divide that by 4, get them weighed out. So now that I have all 4 of these shaped up here, still just a little sticky. I have a quartz countertop. If you had something a little different, you might need to flour your countertop. But I'm going to set that in there, seam side down, just like so. I'm going to repeat with the others, and then we're going to get them proofing. Now, just before I wrap them up with plastic, I've beaten 1 egg, and I'm just going to give them a nice, healthy egg wash here. That's going to help keep them nice and moist on the top, prevent the tops from drying out. Even though we have them plastic wrapped, we want to make sure that they stay dry during that proofing process. Well, here we are in the proofer / yeast incubator. Got them. I also boiled some water and just put it in this little bowl here, and it's just going to help keep a slightly more humid environment while this is proofing. All right, so after 18 hours, these have not risen as much as I wanted. I was really hoping that they were going to be about 2/3 full. They're around a half, but you know what? It's my first time making it. What can you do? Let's give it a whirl anyway. I've got my oven preheated at 350 degrees. It's been sitting there nice and hot for a little while. I'm going to just take another egg wash here, give it a quick basting. All right, now I'm going to leave them on this baking sheet, and we're going to fire this in the oven. So they were on the middle rack, and I'm going to check on them in about 40 minutes. And after 48 minutes, these are coming out. They're looking beautiful, golden brown. Obviously didn't get quite as high as I was hoping. However, I need to quickly deal with them here and get them hanging upside down. Carefully pop those off. Now I'm going to steal a trick from my mother-in-law, which was hanging these upside down. So I'm going to just actually start off with a knife here, just to get through the paper. And then once I get through to the other side, I can see where there we go. I can feel where it's trying to poke through. Aha! And so hang it upside down like that. And apparently that helps prevent this from trying to deflate. due to this little force called gravity. So let's do that again with this one. Kind of near the bottom. Didn't even need the knife for that one. And now we're going to let these cool for a couple hours. Now, since the first two Pannetone did not rise as much as I was really hoping within the window, I let these other two go an extra evening here. They have risen a little bit more, and I've got the oven once again preheated to 350. I've got my little egg wash here. I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to do what my mother-in-law likes to do, which is score the top in just a simple cross pattern. We're going to see if that makes any difference with these second two here. This little egg wash, and then just using my lamb that I use for my sourdough. Just a little cross. And into the oven, and I will check on them. I'm just putting them in the middle rack. In 20 minutes, like I did with the first two, I will just rotate that around, and then I'll give it another 20 after that. Ooh. After 20 minutes, so yeah, we have some rise happening here. So I'm just going to spin this and check on it in another 20. Okay, I've just pulled these from the oven, and a toothpick was going in nice and clean, so it's time to skewer these again. Just going to, once again, use a little knife just to pierce that paper. Trying to go right through the middle and out the other side. I will just hang these once again in these buckets so that they can cool without deflating. All right, full disclosure. I also made a couple of these, I'm going to call them Pannelofis, in these small little foil loaf pans just because I only had so many of the Pannetone wrappers. I was just curious to see how this would turn out. Whoop. Look at that, fun. Let us cut right in the middle and take a look. Hey, that's super nice. Look at all that. So the second round Pannetones, I would say they rose just a little bit more than the previous batch, which is awesome. I do like what the scoring pattern does on the top here. It gives it a fun little look. But most importantly, let's slice in and take a little peek here. Ooh, look at that. Fun little air pockets here and there. Lots of the fruit and the nuts in there. We have to try this. Ooh. I took that, lightly toasted it, a little butter on there. It smells absolutely amazing. All that citrusy mixed fruit. It's very bitters-like, and there's some bitters in there too, which is awesome. Just jumping out at me. Moist. It's got the cranberries in there. Yeah, this is very, very cranberry old-fashioned. It's got the sweetness there that you would get from a sugar syrup and from the cranberry juice, really rich cranberry juice. It's got the cranberries, obviously. It's got the bitters. It's got that citrus character from that mixed peel in there. And you can taste the bourbon. It is there. It follows through in the finish. Really quite delightful. And it's got the hazelnuts in there, the really nice, rich nuttiness coming out of there. And it's got a really, really cool crunch in there. I'm super, super excited. But I'm also very nervous because we still have the Pannetone competition coming up here with my mother-in-law, and she's probably going to wipe the floor with me. But you know what? For my first time trying this out and going for something like a cranberry old-fashioned Pannetone, I'm extremely happy with it. Probably have a lot to learn about this particular dessert, but I'm certainly willing to keep going ahead with that and give it a whirl. Till next time, keep your Pannetones at 11.